Hello, friends. Hello, citizens of humanity. My name is Colin Bigelow, and I've worked daily with the Einstein of consciousness, integral philosopher Ken Wilber since 2002, and I'm his only publicly named spiritual successor. I'm not here writing and speaking today because I feel strong or steady or capable of my higher capacities of communication. I'm here writing today because despite my very best attempts at Emunah and Bitachon, Jewish forms of faith, I found myself smashed upon the rocks of a seaborne wilderness over and over and over for 3 months. And my higher power requires me to share this experience with you now, because I'm shaky and feel like I have no emotional skin. Not in a week or two when I'll feel stronger. God is unequivocally saying, no, you write and publish today because you still feel the ache of crashing into the rocks in every cell of your body. Because even sitting up in this chair and writing is painful. Tell the truth when it hurts. Tell the truth when you made a mistake. Tell the truth because it is true, not because it looks or sounds good. I have asked you to lead and you accepted. Now accept what it means to lead when you are battered, aching, confused, unsure, and afraid. Here I am, Adonai. Hineni. I have no power to keep my voice steady, and when I feel something deeply, my whole body shakes. Feelings that have never been free to come to the surface are starting to for the first time in 37 years, and it shows. Because I always hope to reach new readers and viewers, I've decided an introductory section is a necessity. I will demarcate this section clearly so that already existing readers and viewers can just skip ahead. So, beginning the introductory section. In December, I wrote and YouTube video published a piece called ETHOS, which is easily the most important message I have ever allowed to come through me. There are two equally vital elements of ethos. I recommend you go read the original piece if you haven't already. I'll post links wherever, down below, if it's YouTube, whatever. But for now, I will offer up a summary of those two foundational ideas, which are not simply ideas. They are ideas that must become actions, even small actions, if they are to mean anything. In ethos, I call upon every person on earth to deeply consider developing a moral, spiritual identity I call a citizen of humanity, both prior to and superseding any other national, ethnic, sectarian, or religious identities. Such that, as a globally oriented identity, we can avoid, minimize, contain, or if all else fails, engage ethically in whatever level of conflict or war arrives at our doorsteps. And for some of us, of course, it's already there and has been. We do this in community with other citizens of humanity in all nations, in all lands. It is a trans-global humanitarian civic identity where I most emphatically recommend developing a personal relationship with a higher power of your understanding. And any agnostic or atheist version will do. so long as that higher power advises you to serve humanity as a whole to the best of your ability. Secondly, in ETHOS, I explained why I wrote and recorded that message. Even though my deepest spiritual roots are Dzogchen Buddhist with a Vajrapani enlightened power emanation, I have also come to love Judaism, and I am in the process of converting. Not to replace any part of my Vajrapani identity, but to add to it. Here, I am simply going to quote what I wrote in my original piece about how I understand the journey I'm on. Open quote. What I'm doing here now is acting out an Abrahamic form of faith to the best of my ability. And forgive me for communicating these Judaic ideas imperfectly, I'm still learning. Lech Lecha is the divine call that begins Abraham's story. Lech, go, walk. Lecha, for yourself, to yourself, toward yourself. God does not simply say, go. God says, go in order to become who you are meant to be. God does not name the destination. God provides no map. Abraham must walk without certainty, without proof, without knowing whether the promises from God will hold. God has made no promises to me. I have only been commanded to be of the greatest service to all humanity that I can be, and that I must walk blindly, not knowing my destination in any way. For me, my Abrahamic walking is in fact talking. I do not know what I will be required to say tomorrow. I only know what I am required to say today. And I'm required to demonstrate Emunah to the best of my ability. In a sentence, Emunah is the courage to remain faithful, responsible, and oriented toward the good, even when the ground is not solid beneath your feet. Emunah is not so much about what faith normally means, where faith means holding the correct beliefs about God. It is living in a way that shows trust in God and reliability to God. It is shown by action, loyalty, and perseverance. When God told Abraham to walk, he walked and kept walking, even amidst fear, doubt, failure, and uncertainty. End of that particular quote. Less than 2 weeks after publishing ETHOS, I published another piece about how I had found myself profoundly lost and utterly alone in the wilderness. And here are a few important sentences from that post, which I also recommend reading the entirety of, and I'll put the link below. I had enough Emunah to enter the wilderness because God told me to do so. But I had zero bitachon, zero active trust that God would love me and care for me while in the wilderness. Subconsciously, based on childhood trauma, I believed God would leave me there to die once God had gotten what God wanted from me. My child self believed all interactions with God were transactional, intrinsically exploitive. In the present, I still hadn't really explored the importance of covenant in Judaism, and I suffered greatly for that deficiency. Open quote. Jews believe that we have a covenant with God. A covenant is a relationship of reciprocal love, caring, and loyalty, from reformjudaism.org. So that's the end of the introductory section for people who haven't read or seen anything else. After posting that piece about being lost in the wilderness at the end of December, I found myself much more profoundly lost, powerless, hopeless, and for my 5-year-old self, suicidal than I was at the time of that writing. And it lasted 3 months. And I am just now emerging from that labyrinth of complex PTSD flashbacks. There's no way to say what I have to say next without saying that I suffered life-threatening abuse from both parents at the age of 5. Again, I'll provide a link below, but reader beware. I know exactly the trauma pattern that ran through me like wildfire for these past 3 months. Through an enormous amount of therapy, clinical ketamine, residential and PHP and IOP treatment, I've been getting to know these patterns and beliefs very well over the past 6 years or so. And having gone to hundreds of 12-step meetings and completed step 3, open quote, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God, close quote, in Al-Anon, I did come to understand something much deeper than I could have understood through therapy or treatment alone. Particularly in any 12-step fellowship where you understand in your bones that if you do not find a solution, you or others will die. The question of your willingness to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand God becomes a life or death question of the highest possible order. All of that is true for me. But it wouldn't be drugs or alcohol that would be the threat. It would be the 5-year-old version of me saying, I am done with this life, than doing something through my adult body that could not be undone. So when I invited God to direct my will and my life in a very unconditional and public way in ETHOS, and God consented, every remaining traumatized child belief and identity rose to the surface and started screaming. Because the gods of my childhood, of everyone's childhood, are your parents. And my parents, knowingly and at times gleefully, inflicted evil upon me. I had no choice about turning my will and my life over to them. I was 5. They were abusive. I did what the gods in my life said to do, or I was literally risking my life. There was no covenantal relationship of reciprocal love, caring, and loyalty between me and the parent gods of my childhood. So even though I did enter that covenantal relationship a bit naively and still needing to know a lot more, willingly as an adult in December, my traumatized 5-year-old parts still did not feel safe. So they defaulted to what kept them safe as a child. Take care of everyone else's needs first, real or perceived, asked for or not, which may be experienced at a level of intensity that may be wildly overblown, and do so as a matter of life and death. What 12-step programs where your life is at stake will show you at step 3 and beyond, of course, is who or what your higher power actually is, particularly in times of stress. And for 3 months, I experienced the brutal, repeated ordeal of continuing to treat Ken and Andrea and others, all as obvious parental stand-ins, as my higher power, and therefore getting smashed into the rocks of a shore God never wanted me to sail near. In terms of recovery, I feel blessed in ways that a lot of my friends do not. When I suffer unbearably, when my inner 5-year-old crumbles under overwhelming past and present pressures, and he does want to die, and then I drink so he feels safe enough to not want to act on that impulse. And then I go to a hospital to safely detox. Through all that, I always come to understand what beliefs and choices led to that particular round of hell. And this always happens, I believe, because when I ask for help, I get it. Every time. Which gives me time to reflect on what happened. And so I learn every time. And thank God for that. This will not surprise any therapist whatsoever. I still hadn't developed the ability to say no to Ken and Andrea and others, even when I knew going along to get along would eventually make me suicidal. And this experience would be almost entirely independent of the real-world significance of the request. Whether I needed to go buy blueberries or do tax preparation work, the stress would feel identical because as a childhood trauma-based identity, I felt compelled to say yes with literally no capacity to say no. What's different now is that I can feel the no within my body instantly. And I've lost the mental power and willingness to override that no. Almost as amazingly, I feel nearly no should energy at all. Those would have been my parents' voices anyway, so not my voice. I do not miss that. You know the funny thing, which really isn't funny, that happens when you start listening to a false or malicious god or idol? You can't hear the real God within you, even if you have heard that voice with perfect clarity before. This was obviously a more personal update, but it's important. The principles remain the same. I believe I heard Jordan Peterson say that every ideal is a judge, and the greater the ideal, the greater the judge. I have committed to a very high ideal in speaking publicly about what I feel is a need for a moral spiritual identity called a citizen of humanity that is needed both within and between nations, and I've asked everyone on earth to consider that idea seriously. And God said to Abraham, or in this case me, go in order to become who you are meant to be. And I am trying. We are talking about some very serious, even ultimate ideals here. And when we miss the mark, fall short, make a mistake, or lose faith, it can hurt us in ways we didn't even know were possible. And if we are hurting alone after trying our best to do something very difficult indeed, we may not even survive if we judge ourselves too harshly. We need each other. When, during the past 5 or 6 years, I was lost in weeks or months of complex PTSD flashbacks, I never found my way back home alone. Andrea and Ken, and a small number of special others, were always there. I could not be doing what I'm doing here without the support of Temple Emmanuel and Free Recovery Community. And in both cases, the leadership know what I'm up to here, and I ask for guidance, or to simply be seen in the deepest work I know how to engage. But it's in having a minimum of 12 people in these communities, genuine friends, who sustain me emotionally, and most of them have no idea what I'm doing here. Meaning, this video, this Substack. They just genuinely like and love me, and I feel the same, and I get to see them every week. I know community will be created around citizens of humanity. It is not optional. It is absolutely necessary. Both Free Recovery Community and Temple Emmanuel are organizations devoted to exploring and communicating and sharing the most meaningful ways to live and die, to understand reality, to experience God, to share joy, to share sorrow, and to pass on legacy and values to our future generations. We will create that here. For now, my marching orders remain the same. If God says there is something that must be written and recorded, then that is what I will do, just as I'm doing now. Thank you for being here with me today. I love you. We'll talk soon. I promise it won't be 3 months.